We have our third roundtable of this week, another very important subject that we picked out. Now, as a Boston firefighter, Wildland was not something that, when I came to work, I really had to worry about, you know? And when we had, as I mentioned on Monday, we had our Wildland Standing Committee meeting, Wildfire Standing Committee meeting out in Las Vegas, and the committee kind of shook me a bit, you know? I realized that I did not have my eye on that ball, and it was coming at us really fast, and that the money that's being pumped into it because of the threat that's emerged with the climate change, the fact that we as people are moving into more likely to burn places, creating that interface, all of that is bearing down on us. And as you know, firefighter that works on a ladder truck that's pretty much square in the middle of downtown with high rises, and it's not really my thing. But what I came to learn after that meeting was when it hits that interface, those suburban departments that are on the edge of the wildland, they certainly don't have the resources to deal with what's coming at them. And the first thing they do is they pick up the phone, not like traditional mutual aid. They can't just start striking alarms and getting a little help from next door. They do that for sure. But they also pick up the phone and say, we need, I don't know, 300? Can you send me 300 firefighters now? Who gets the call? You know, that's one, like when the red phone rings, you go, I might have to wake up the captain on this one, you know? But that's what history has taught us is happening in places where traditionally it doesn't happen. We haven't dealt with it before. So we got to get ahead of it. And what the IFF has done is built a training program that's, you know, second to none to train firefighters that don't come from that sector of firefighting, to give them a crash course in it, because it could be any night. And I mentioned on Monday, when I flew home from that meeting, I came out of the tunnel in Eastie, crested the expressway in Boston, and the whole skyline, as far as you could see, was smoke. And I clicked on my little app on the phone to see what was going on. And it turned out that, you know, they had, I don't know, a dozen acres or something burned. I don't even know how much, but they had 10 or 12 fire departments down there, including my own, which from a perspective standpoint, when I show up to work in the morning, they can say, yeah, you're going to engine 16 for the day tour and ladder 6 for the night, or engine 18 for 24. And you might show up out there, and if there's 2 guys on overtime in a probie, you're the boss. They throw you in the front seat. And we must have had, you know, a whole first alarm assignment, maybe more. I know Scotty's going to talk about it, but hey, man, I could have been bossing a company out there like this. I'm not trained in any of that. Oh, wearing bunker gear, running 1 3/4 lines, tying them together, coupling them up, running hundreds and hundreds of feet. It's not how that works. And if history's taught us anything, building collapses kill us in numbers. Sometimes explosions kill us in numbers. And wildfires kill us in numbers. That wind shifts, or that topography is not in your favor. You don't know what you're doing. We get killed. We get killed in large numbers. And it shook me. It was like a wake-up call. And as I mentioned Monday, shortly thereafter, I happened to be in the company of the President of the United States and the Majority Leader of the U.S. Senate, and asked me what's going on. And the number one thing in my head was, if we don't get everybody trained up rather quickly, we're going to have large-scale deaths, you know, like we saw too many times before. And I put the news on out here the other night, and they were activating the Canadian military to go up to Newfoundland, out on the Rock, for the massive wildfires they're having out there. The second part of that story was the massive wildfires out in British Columbia. It's East Coast, West Coast. You know, it's not the traditional, you know, California problem that I kind of grew up in my head at being. And, you know, today we wanted to make sure that I think we titled this "Coming to a City Near You," because in places like Gatlinburg, when that place was burning, they called Charlotte and said, hey, same thing, can you send us 100, 200 guys? We need help now. We need engines, send everybody you got. And that's like a, middle of the night call. They said, who? We gotta wake somebody up for that order. But that's what's happening more and more often. And the people on the stage right now have seen it. They're on the forefront of what we need to be doing. And we're so lucky to have our own Dr. Laurie Moore-Merrell sitting as the U.S. Fire Administrator. And the federal government's a complicated place. We have a lot of moving parts, and with an $80 million budget in the IFF, they have a few more at the federal government. And how we address the problem is a red tape cutting exercise. And having Laurie that knows every nook and cranny of us and the reality of the problem that we're facing is so important. So thank you for being here, Laurie. And also joining us, our local, hands down, that is the foremost authority in wildfire, is CAL FIRE Local 2881. We have 7,500 members in that local. They do it all. They do structural firefighting, and in Cali, they run the show. I've been out to a few of those fires. It's like an army taking over. It's pretty impressive to watch. They got an air attack. They got their own Air Force. They're an impressive outfit. And so Timmy, thanks for being here. Timmy's their president. Been on the job for 30 years now, there and abouts. Done it all. And of course, Frankie's going to talk in a little minute, but he's a guy that's been in the riots in LA and in the wildfires in the hills, And we also have with us this morning, coming in from Austin, Texas, a city firefighter, battalion chief down in Austin, vice president of the local, where he's got a story to tell too about how it wasn't his problem till it was. And that's the lesson that we're going to take away here. This isn't someone else's problem. This could be that call that your department gets in the middle of the night. And that's what we're going to deliver home here, And up here in Canada, they're leading the way. They, through the political work that they've done, they've secured federal funding to get firefighters in Canada trained in RTI in our program. Similar like the hazmat structure that we rolled out 30 years ago. Right now, IFF is the lead authority in training hazmat response in the US. We also have federal money up here in Canada. We need to be that authority in RTI as well. So we have Brise with us today from Kamloops, British Columbia, and also a longtime pal of mine, Scotty, come on the job a little bit before me, probably a couple classes before me. Rose through the ranks in the fire department a little quicker than me. Still driving ladder, still riding backwards on ladder 17 more often than not. But I got to work with Scotty over the years as he promoted through the ranks. He's a great guy, he's a Marine Corps veteran. I'll give you a quick story about who Scotty is. One of the things that Scotty wanted to do to give back, him and his wife was wonderful as well. I think she's out here with you too, right? Awesome. So they bought a villa. They went deep, bought a villa down in, in St. John. And they would take wounded veterans down there and take them scuba diving. A beautiful thing. Heart of gold, And heart of gold and gold badge, so he gets paid good dough too. But on that day, he earned his dough because he was the boss in charge of that fire. And then he's added a week or two later, right? It wasn't a one-shot deal. 2 weeks later, it was like deja vu all over again. And Scotty's a district chief in Boston, and arguably the busiest fire district in the city. 3-decker, taxpayer, brownstone, fire district. And he's got a bunch of, urban firefighters in the middle of the woods on a blazing hot day, and it's an eye-opener, So with that, we'll get started, and I'll turn it over to my partner, GST Frankie Líma.
Hey, thanks, GP. Hello? Yeah. Thanks, GP. It was good when you made GST, got to come out to California several times and really see, unlike, say, a hurricane's predictable, to fathom a neighborhood of 1,000 homes going to bed at night at 10, and by 3 a.m., every one of those homes is just down to the concrete and foundation. It's just hard to fathom that, so thanks for always being there. And I know Randy's been out to California a lot, and I've been a lot of fires with this guy. So first question's to Dr. Laurie. All right, so with you at the federal level now, can you tell us the status on what our general president asked President Biden with GP Kelly?
That's a great question. So I'm going to give you the backstory on how we got to where we are right now. So when the ask was made, and I heard about it actually through, I heard about it through the IFF actually. I got a call and a heads up saying, hey, this happened. The GP rode back on the plane with POTUS, and there was an ask. And so I had a little bit of a heads up, thank goodness, because I got a call from the White House shortly thereafter. The National Security Council is our contact through the White House from FEMA. And so the head of the National Security Council called, and thankfully I have a relationship there too because of working the transition team with the Biden-Harris administration. And so the head of that Security Council was with me on that team. And so she calls and she said, Laura, do you know anything about this? And I hesitated to say, yes, I already know about this. So I just let her talk, and I said, well, what was the ask? And she says to me, well, there's WUI training. Do you know anything about the WUI training? And I said, yeah, I do know something about that. And the gap, and she said, well, we need some evidence of the gap, because the ask that was made, we need to better understand the ask. And so I was asked to produce a memo on profiling all training available for both structural and wildland firefighters. And so my first call is back to Rick Swan, of course, at the IFF, and I said, Rick, you're gonna need to talk me through this. I didn't come up in the WUI or wildland interface situation. And so Rick did, we talked through it. The NWCG, for those in the room who know about wildland firefighter training, you know that they control all of that training. And so we were able to create this memo, quite extensive actually, the memo defining all of the training, and you can clearly see a gap. But because of the nomenclature that I've talked to you about a couple days ago between wildland and the interface, that gap is not readily visible to those who just talk about wildland training. And so the memo was sent over to the White House. A few days later, they call a roundtable, because you can't just, they don't just take your word for it, by the way. So there's a roundtable called of all federal organizations who have anything to do with wildland, WUI, anything within that space. And so we were brought back into the group. This is Interior. It is all of Interior's agencies, BLM, all of those folks. It was Agriculture, U.S. Forest Service, NIST, everybody who has anything in this space. And in this roundtable, then they asked the question again, do you guys know anything about a gap in training? Well, immediately, no. Forest Service was saying there's no gap in training. We're training structural firefighters to wildland all the time. So you can see the conversation going. I even had FEMA people saying, well, we have FEMA grants, AFG and SAFER, but AFG covers structural firefighters being trained in the wildland. And I let them finish, everybody being respectful, let them finish talking. And I said, I'm sorry, I have to weigh in with all due respect. That is not what we're talking about. So you see how the words matter? Because even at FEMA, they thought we had grants that covered this. And that's simply not the case. And so the point was made on that call in front of everybody, and we even had to clarify. And at the time I was using yellow shirts and blue shirts, and we talked some about that, and the difference in yellow shirts and blue shirts. And to make it very basic so people who have no knowledge of firefighting could understand this. And so we continued this conversation. So after that, we had a couple more follow-ups. I asked Rick Swan again for some talking points. I said, we need some very basic talking points. So 1 page, no more, few talking points of how to describe this gap. And so we moved forward with that. Talking points went back over to the White House so that they could understand. And I said, we need to share these with the whole group. They went out again to that whole group. And so long story longer, we're going to continue the conversation. But right now, we're down to U.S. Forestry, USFA, and the IFF are having conversations. And so there will be some funding We're still talking about the amount. We're talking about how that money is going to be transferred and whether it is, budget dust off of the infrastructure bill that went to, where all the funding went to DOI and ag, and then FEMA got funding, but it's after the fire funding. It has nothing in there for this kind of thing. So we're working through the details, and that's where we are today. So that's how things play out. That's why it's important that we stay in communication, and that's how it works inside.
Thank you. So, Laurie, obviously is a major issue. In the infrastructure bill, the feds put a ton of dough into dealing with wildfire. What type of, obviously we see the news, 2881's living it, California, Oregon, now British Columbia, departments are living with it every day. Are the feds really, is it getting to your desk, the data that they're tracking on how these wildfires are emerging in places that they don't normally see them?
Oh, that's a great question. So as I established on Monday, we've got a data problem. And unfortunately, the data that when we respond, we being structural firefighters, even when you are trained and we do respond in the WUI, those fires are not being captured. There's no data system that is appropriately capturing those because the U.S. Forest Service, they capture some of their own data. We try to capture it in the antiquated INFIRS system, but often it's recorded as one. So one, not 1,080, not 3,000, right, fires. And so this is the problem with the data. So it's hard for us to make the case. We can talk about acres, but what does that mean? I can give you multiple houses, but what does that mean? And so until we can establish how we're capturing the data and combine these data sources, aggregate them based on a geolocation, and tell these real stories, this is still an uphill battle. We have to keep plugging away at being able to tell the reality of what is happening within what we know as wildland, because that's trees and that's forest burning, and the interface where it meets the built environment and the population. So we still have a data problem.
Next question's for Scott. I understand you were working that day up in Boston with the Blue Hills fire we saw on the video there, and you were the operations chief. Can you tell us some of the, how your day was and any challenges that you may have faced or unexpected things?
Sure. I think that morning we had a little kitchen fire. Nothing big and bad for District 8 in Boston. Guys open the back door, they blow the fire out, come back, get a cup of coffee. We get a call from mutual aid to go to the Blue Hills, which is only about 5 miles south of Boston. The Milton deputy, Milton's a small town right outside of Boston. He says, "Can you go up to the top and protect the environmental lab?" I said, "Absolutely." And I thought that would be pretty easy enough. And I go up there, and there's companies, there's pumps cavitating, there's people have too much bunker gear on. I'm like, I'm not quite sure. I don't know. We're doing something, but I'm not quite sure if we're doing I know what we're doing is wrong. This is absolutely not, and we don't have any really in training. We've had a lot of training. We've had tech rescue, hazmat, active duty shooting, all sorts of EMS. We've had all sorts of training. We've had back to basics since the commissioner took over in 2015. I don't think that you're going to get better than Mattapan and Dorchester and Boston. However, we went up there and they made them. Eddie works in the slower district of fires, but that's okay. Somebody's got to do it. But going up to the Blue Hills, you would think that we'd have a better. They're calling us for help, and these small little towns are running one. One lieutenant's driving the engine. I'm like, What do you guys need? Well, just tell us what to do. And they're like, "Chief, you're operations. You got to tell us what to do." I said, all right. Well, I've seen Only the Brave. I think I've read a couple books. I have a deputy that will send me all sorts of stuff online, Deputy Chief Fleming. So, long story short, I really don't have any idea what to do. And I don't blame training, I don't blame any of that, but there is a big, when people call, we'll show up. We ask fire alarm, can we have another engine? We had 3 engines that day. I had a truck. I had even our brush unit. We still don't know what to do with that thing. So I don't know whether to pull the company. And we were all in a gully running 2.5s, and that's not our thing. Our thing is like opening up roofs, grabbing people on the 3rd floor. You know, is it out? Can we go back? That's a classic firefighter question. Can we go back? Are we done? Can we go home? I'm like, we're not going home after this, after the wildfire. So we were there for a while. We ad lib. I have to say that, like, I made Engine 16 logistics, which was just kind of to give them a little, make fun of them a little bit, because they said you got to go back and get the water and run it. You know, we have to start getting water to these engines before they cavitate. And so I was kind of busting this new lieutenant's chops. And, but it was really all ad lib. And I said, like I said, that's just, I mean, we see it on TV, and I'm like, wow, those guys have a hard job. They must be out there all day. And listen to these guys, they are. But that's just not our thing. But we're showing up 1 and 3, 4 engines, water. Sometimes we can get a hydrant, sometimes we can't. But even simple stuff like, do we take off our bunker coats? Are they going to get burnt? That's the main, like somebody said last night, oh, you got to watch out for the branches. I've never even thought about that, a branch coming down and hurting someone. So basically that's from the city's point of view. And I'm sure that I'm not alone talking to other people from other cities. They don't have a lot of equipment and definitely don't have a lot of training in the wildland urban interface.
Yeah, it's a brave new world for us, you know, but Timmy, you guys have been doing it for time and eternal, and I'm sure it's changed over the years, and it just seems like Frankie said, been out there a few times, and every time I went there it was the biggest fire ever. The next one was bigger than the last one, the next one was bigger than the last one. It feels like it's changing. I mean, obviously, you know, climate got to be playing a role in it. Where we live got to be playing a role in it. But do you see the difference from maybe where it was 30 years ago to where we are today as far as, you know, the interface portion of it?
Oh, yeah, most definitely. It's actually kind of coming from California. There is no firefighter in California that's not wildfire trained, because it hits every fire department in California. So we have a robust mutual aid system, which is very fortunate because no one department can do the same. But in today's mega fires, you know, they built so many homes up into the interface that every fire becomes an interface fire for us. So we have homes burning constantly, and it's growing. And so our big problem is not the training within California, it's the resources, even in local government and county and state fire service. So without having enough resources, and the first resources on scene they have to protect those structures and life property as the wildfire itself gets bigger until we can get more resources on scene. But fortunately, we don't have the training capability, because training is now part of the state fire marshal curriculum in California. So whether you're in Long Beach City or LA City or even Sac Metro area, you're all going to go to wildfire at some point in time. We're just having resource problems because the fires are getting so big and so many homes are involved now. You talked about, and I believe it was the Tubbs fire you were talking about when we went and saw that whole Coffee Park destroyed, you know, and then you go to Paradise and you see the city of Paradise destroyed, you know. So when you say wildfire, it's structural fire too. You have 1,200 homes burning, you're exposed to that same fire as a structural fire. But, you know, we have that training in California, fortunately, so we're not, you know, and we have a robust mutual aid system, so it's really great.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. And it used to be called seasonal, you know, but these fires are all year long now, you know, in the January or whatever. And in California, the U.S. Forest Service is so understaffed. How's that going to affect you and your crew and the fires in California?
Well, that's where the problem's been the last few years. A lot of these fires have started on federal lands and come off federal lands into state responsibility or into cities. And that's tying our resources, CAL FIRE resources, up going to federal, which causes more draw on local government to come to our fires. So that's where the resources are being drained because the federal government is not staffed appropriately. And they're having a hard time recruitment. I just read an article in the paper a couple of days ago. They can't even get people to work for the feds. So last year, they brought in, private companies to staff their stations.
So, given that, do you guys often and see a need for large-scale mutual aid, like bringing in firefighters from Texas or Oregon, other trained IFF type, trained members that come into California, some of these large-scale fires?
Yeah, over the last few years especially, we've been using a lot of outer-state resources coming in. Our concern with out-of-state resources coming in is that they're not trained appropriately. A municipal department coming in is trained in firefighting, but they might not have training in wildfire. And coming in knowing the proper language of what bump and run means, structure protection, and other stuff like that we need. When you have resources coming in without the same knowledge or communications, it creates a big, more of a liability upon the incident command team to be watching out for those incoming resources.
Yeah, definitely. I can see where the vernacular is totally different, That can be a huge issue. A radio that can talk to a radio is different than a person that can talk to a person,
Scott, where do you think the fire service is lacking in the wildland urban interface training?
Probably start out with the basics. I mean, we were talking last night about terminology and nomenclature, and just to give you an idea, studying for the ranks, we go up to the ranks, we study the books, but city fire departments take out wildland to read for it, so we don't even read about it. So we don't go to the island. We could even something else to put on except for bunker gear. Basic training as far as what to do with the limited water supply. Again, last night with ICS, flanking is great with the manpower. I'm sure it could be fit to the Northeast. But again, I think it would just be a matter of getting everybody together and saying this is the basic. This is what we want you to do. We want you to protect these homes. We realize it's going to be 10 acres, not probably 3,000 acres, but still 10 acres to us is a big deal. And we should have an idea of what we're doing going forward. So I mean, equipment, training, and the command staff should really pay attention, especially safety concerns of do we let it burn, do we not let it burn, stuff like that. We just haven't had that even introduction to it yet.
I know, one of the chiefs was calling in for airstrikes, and it was like, state police called back. They don't do that. Call the National Guard. Yeah, they're fishing this weekend. They ain't until next weekend, and just winging it, And I know the Blue Hills it's not all hills. There's companies up there. There's housing on the backside of that. The wind was blowing the other way. It could have been a major issue. But for us, right, we have the RTI program, the IFF. It was built by, when Rick Swan deserves great credit for a lot of our wildland urban interface, the work that's been done thus far. How the RTI program kind of become?
GP, I'll tell you that the basic, technically the RTI was born at the 2016 convention, and I know that Brother Líma remembers that well because he spoke to our resolution. We had a resolution that passed unanimously on the floor in the 2016 convention that basically said we're going to take this seriously. One of the resolves in that resolution said that we are going to build or research, into some type of new WUI training program. And the reason for that was primarily for firefighting safety. I chuckled with you a little bit, Chief, when you said that's not our thing. I want you to understand something. It's something he said really resonated with me, which is, once upon a time, Austin firefighters, it wasn't our thing either. We were structural firefighters, and those bush fires out there, the county guys will take care of it, those county volunteers. So it wasn't our thing either, right? It kind of did become our thing. So back to the birth of the RTI, as far as when it was technically done, it was at the convention. It passed unanimously, and then shortly after, actually very quickly after, within 4 or 5 months, Rick Swan, working at the IFF at the time, he decided to get a couple guys together. I was one of them, from Austin Local 975. He also got Justin White from Local 5, Colorado Springs, and he got Phil Veneris from Local 2881. Put us in a room in Denver and said, how are we going to do this? Well, that's a big Herculean task, just so everybody knows. How are we going to fix this problem? Because really, we had all done a little bit of research. Myself and Justin had both been in really bad situations, kind of like you're talking about, Chief, but we lost a lot of homes, right? Me and Justin both did, and we felt like we were trained in the right way, but we weren't. So we had experience in this, the bad side of the experience, which was very painful for both of us. We had an opportunity to talk to each other about it later on, and it was a very painful experience to sit there and watch your community burn down, thinking you knew what you were doing, right? You think you know what you're doing, but we didn't. In that meeting, that initial meeting in Denver, we came up with a couple things. First of all, we wanted to do research on previous or other programs. We kind of had some ideas, but we really wanted to put our heads together and try to come up and see whatever program we had in the country. We went out, looked for classes. Some of us took classes and everything else to see if there was anything that was out there that we could actually use, to implement within the IFF. Quite honestly, everything we came across fell short. The Wildland side uses what's called the S215. But the problem is when you go to an S215 on the Wildland side, it's built for wildland firefighters. It's also trains you how to protect 2 or 3 structures, okay, at the most. And just like when I was talking back in 2016 about the resolution, how many guys and girls in here have ever protected an exposure? Everybody has, right? So nobody in this room needs training on how to protect 1 or 2 exposures. Right? That was the first thing we came up with. We really needed to have a training program that really addressed what was really going on. The other thing we did at that meeting was we developed objectives. And some of the objectives are, almost all of them actually we made are still in place today. And I'll just go over a couple of them. The primary objective is going to be firefighter safety. That's number 1. Number 2, we wanted to make sure that whatever training we designed was going to be for urban interface firefighting. And I talked to Dr. Moore last week and told her that one of the things we decided to do within the first year of running down a development path was we actually removed the word wildland out of our program. So just so everybody knows, when you go to the RTI class, you don't hear us talking about WUI at all, because that's not what we're doing. We're not teaching people how to be wildland firefighters. That was another big objective, is to say, hey, this isn't about teaching structural firefighters how to be wildland firefighters. This is teaching structural firefighters how to protect as many structures as possible, especially those first engine companies, right? So that was another big one, was just to make sure that we were understood that what our mission is to train brothers and sisters on engine companies inside the city to go out and actually protect homes. The other thing is we wanted to build a program that was very flexible, a program that we could go to Florida, we could use their fuels, we could use their equipment, we could use their homes, because everything's different across the country. We can't sit there and make a cookie cutter program that says you're going to do exactly what they did in California everywhere else, right? So we wanted to be flexible where we could go someplace and actually use their stuff and teach them on their stuff. And then lastly, that I'll talk about, one of the most important things is we had to design a program that would work for shift firefighters. Not a 40-hour class or something like that you would have to go sit down and cost your department a whole bunch of overtime, but actually something that you could, what we came up with is basically doing an online class, that takes 8 to 10 hours, sitting around a station. And then we come in and do a hands-on portion or a field day. And then we let you really feel what we've taught you. And because it's really important, you can sit there all day long and say, hey, listen, this is how you do things, but until you actually get to feel what it feels like to do a withdrawal out of a neighborhood, you never know what it's like. And I've got some pretty bad experiences with calling for withdrawals and finding out the guys and girls were down inside the neighborhood that was burning all around them trying to load LDH, right? And it's like, that's not what kind of withdrawal we're talking about. So we set those objectives, and basically we really started just putting, the wheels to the pavement and started building out The one thing we ended up doing, just so you all know, for our basis for the program is we really looked at a lot of different programs when we were researching it, and the one that really stuck out to us was the WUI operation principles out of CAL FIRE. They had a manual that, interestingly enough, at one point we were going to just rebuild everything, and me and Justin White just learned pretty quickly that all you had to do was go back and look and reference everything in the manual. So what we did is we kind of used the WUI operations manual out of CAL FIRE as the foundation, but we also then did some big adjustments on it to make sure that those training topics and stuff were very relevant across the country and Canada. So that was it. That's how it got started.
Yeah, Randy, as you said, you're a big proponent, local 975 on the with the RTI, and it's honor to speak on favor of it because it's important in 2016. What has it done for the city of Austin Fire Department specifically?
So, we have been involved with the training program right from the get-go. And one of the things that we did during the development phase is we allowed, the beta testing to go on in both Austin, and then we also had our brothers and sisters in San Antonio help out also. So we did a lot of testing there. We did testing all over the country, by the way. We did it also in Maine and Montana and some other places, but we did a lot of the beta testing there. Long story short, last July, we actually did one of the first actual train-the-trainers in Austin. And the goal for that train-the-trainer was basically to train every Austin firefighter and all of our mutual aid partners on the program. We got that in place. The train-the-trainer was last July. In January, I was able to get support from City Council to push that forward. And starting by the end of January, beginning of February, we started training every Austin firefighter to the RTI program. Now, it's important to note that our involvement started something like yours did, Chief. Back in 2011, we had a brutal year. Any Texas firefighters out there will tell you we all remember 2011. It was terrible. We had a trial by fire. We had a really long, extended drought. We had winds from tropical storms, and we had, some bad stuff. It was a big year for lessons learned, and that's kind of what carried forward for us. Right this very moment, as I talk to y'all, we're in a worse drought than that, and we're in a worse fire environment than that. We are burning every day, and there's a good chance that here this afternoon, Austin firefighters and those around us will be actually protecting structures at one point or another during the day today. So over the past 2 weeks, we've been immersed in fire in the Austin area. We've had multiple urban interface fires. I've had very dear friends of mine on the department who were also at the 2011 fires who were calling me to thank me for this program, thank for the cadre for putting this program together. The reason being is because now they feel more confident. They know what they're doing. They don't feel like you felt when you show up, right? Or like I felt in 2011 was like, wow, everything's wrong. I thought I knew about this, but I don't. They felt better. And I think there's a big testament to be said when one of them said something to me very, very, I think very relevant to this and kind of something I'm proud of. He said, if we would have been fighting these fires the past 2 weeks back in 2011, we would have already lost a lot of homes. We would have already had our firefighters in a lot of close calls. We would not be doing as well as we're doing today. And that's right now, just so you all know, we're less than half of the firefighters that are trained, on the program. But they're saying that just by even having half of them trained, it's making such a huge difference on these fires, and they're able to get a good grip on them. So we're really committed in Austin. Our city council and everybody there, the mayor, everybody now is recognizing the importance of this, and it's not going to stop there at this point. And I know San Antonio is talking about doing it next.
Well, I know back in 2000, we were in Vancouver in 2017, I believe.
Yeah, I think so.
And Vancouver's a beautiful city, and beautiful skyline with the ski mountains in the back. And when the IFF went to Vancouver, the wildfires were so bad there was no skyline. You couldn't see the mountains. The smoke covered everything. And Canada is no stranger to wildfire. But just like we're experiencing in the States, it's impacting places that they didn't always have massive urban interface issues. And we had a fire up in Fort McMurray, which is an IFF local in a city up in the oil fields north of Edmonton in probably 16 or 17, 18, when was that? 18, 17?
That would have been a year before.
Fort
I
Mac.
think. Yeah, probably 16.
So they had a massive wildfire that burnt their city down. They were doing things like trying to save the hospital, save the water treatment plant. Matter of fact, there was a captain on an engine that made a decision, and these are city firefighters, they're not trained or anything, made a decision to commandeer a bulldozer and start bulldozing down houses half the street. Just because, in the Fort Mac guys, how many people getting the job up there? Any idea? It's probably 100.
Almost 200, probably.
A couple hundred-man department, probably on duty strength of, call it 50. And the whole city's burning. Everyone's in their own fight. You know, the bosses on the street are making judgment calls like take a bulldozer and wipe all those houses out. And it turned out to be a prudent decision. It's where, in that neighborhood, they stopped the fire. But, you know, you're a boss on an engine in a city, bulldozing down a bunch of houses a little above your pay grade. But not that day, you know? But in Canada, you guys, through your lobbying, you're making aggressive steps towards getting this RTI training out. Mark, can you kind of share what the plan is, how you hope we can accomplish it up here?
Well, we've been very fortunate. So just a little background. I joined the Wildland Task Force in 2019. I met Randy, and he told me all about this program, and he told me that I needed to take a course. So working with DVP Carter, we found a course in Issaquah, Washington. I went down there and took the course, and I was just blown away. I was like, we need this. And DVP Carter was, he's like, well, what's so special about it? And it's like, well, it's teaching structural firefighters how to operate in the interface with their equipment. And bottom line is it's going to keep firefighters safer, and we're going to protect more structures. And he said, great, we'll make it a federal lobby issue. And I was like, that sounds amazing, let's do it. And so that was in 2020. And then through the work of the Scott Marks and then Sean McManus and their staff, fast forward to this year, and there's an announcement made that they're going to fund the IFF program to do this. In that time, a couple things happened. Just like in California, we had another record year for fires, then another record year for fires. We had a federal election, and yeah, things really worked out for us. As someone that's going to benefit directly from that funding, I just want to say thank you to the Canadian government for supporting this important initiative.
Hey, Mark, so how do you envision rolling out the RTI program in Canada?
Well, we're lucky. We've been doing the hazmat program for a number of years, so we've got that template. So it'll be similar to that. Fire departments across Canada will contact the Canadian office and request the training. And I think it's important to note that this training is going to be available to all fire departments, not just IFF departments across Canada, all fire departments. Because as the GP said, when you get one of these incidents and you call for 300 firefighters, you're not just going to get IFF firefighters. You're going to, whether it's your province or your state, they're going to send you what they got. So it's important training for all firefighters. So we'll be rolling that out as soon as possible. We're going to prioritize building a Canadian cadre of instructors. Once we've got that built, we'll be able to get the training out across the country. Initially, we're going to utilize the instructors from the United States. Randy's going to be getting a condo somewhere in Canada for a little bit, but no,
Thanks, I'm just learning that.
no, we'll get the courses out. In the 6th district, we put out just a request for interest for instructors and just to see what we had. And within a number of days, we had 50 super qualified people that want to help with this program. So we're going to make it work, and we'll get it going.
Do what we always do, adapt and overcome. Luckily, Randy, we just passed a resolution to help you with your immigration problems. Real quick, before we wrap up, Dr. Laurie wants to.
I would love just to give you some wrap up from a national perspective. This is fabulous what you've heard, and you've seen how it has evolved. So from a national lay of the land, what you have to understand is that the interface is going to continue to expand. And what we're trying to teach at the national level is that cutting down trees and building houses doesn't mean that that geography is not going to burn. These forests have been burning for hundreds of years. Just because you cut down trees and put homes there does not mean they're going to stop burning. Please understand that. As you expand, you all are annexing, you know how your jurisdictions are annexing and spreading and building suburbs in land that used to be populated by trees, that used to burn. It's still going to burn. And so we've got to focus where we can make a difference, and this is going to be an issue. So walk through what you just heard. At the national level, we work on something called the National Cohesive Strategy. Have you all heard that? So I'm sure anybody in the CAL FIRE has. But the national organizations, there's 3 primary strategies in that. One is a resilient landscape. What that means is that's DOI and that's ag, making sure that the trees in the underbrush and they do prescribe burns. That's great. The other 2 are directly in our wheelhouse. One of them is fire-adapted communities, which means we have to learn to live with fire. If you're going to build in this space, you better know how to build properly with building codes, fire-resistant materials, proper roofing materials, proper windows, vents, all of those things, because otherwise it's going to burn. And so we have to talk about that. The last and the 3rd strategy in that National Cohesive Strategy is a safe and effective response. That is squarely in our wheelhouse. We have to make sure we have training. We have to make sure we have proper PPE, and that we are continuing down this path with safe and effective response. You all know that. We've been saying that for years in our structural environment. The same applies now in this environment. I mentioned some grants on Monday. So we have just compiled all grants, not just from FEMA, but from DOI, from agriculture, all of them in one place. So I'm going to make sure the IFF has that link. I've posted it on my social media as well, but I'm going to give it to you, Mr. GP, to put out on your social media. Go to that link. There are grant resources for things like this that may not be customary, and we're going to continue the path that we have to get funding as well. So I just wanted everybody to know about that, sir.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Laurie, and thank you for being here. And Timmy, thank you for sharing your wisdom, and Randy, your experience, and Mark, what we're doing up here in Canada, and Scotty for bearing our truths. You know, you never made it on last 17, though. You know, listen, hey, there was a great program. We have a lot to learn and accomplish in this area of firefighting that we will get done. I just want to thank the Roundtable for joining us. We do have a little gift for you. We'll meet you over the side and present a little gift to you. Laurie will give you probably an axe for home and an axe for in case you got to chop out of your house in a wildfire.